If you take your food personally, like me, then you need to get on the Thrive food discovery and ordering app. Join the community of foodies on the Thrive feed, where you can curate restaurant lists, ask for recos, and chat about all things food. So download it today and start thriving. Hi, welcome to another episode of Speak Greasy. My guest today is Anuradha Joshi Medhora, who is the chef and founder of Mumbai-based Charoli, which is a food, catering and delivery business focusing on the royal cuisines of the Malwa region. Welcome to the show, Anuradha.
Thank you so much. It's so great to be here as well.
Well, first and foremost, you cooked a stunning meal here at Mac Street Kitchen. What was that experience like?
Too much fun. It really was. Like, I walked into this kitchen and I was like, okay, let's do this. Even before we had started, I knew I was going to have a lot of fun. It's a very good energy when you walk in, and I think it's also like a dream kitchen for any chef. Like, you walk in and you've got everything. Like, whatever you can dream that you require, it's there. And then you get the room full of people who've just come to enjoy a meal. And I think the joy of feeding people who actually are there to also really enjoy that evening is, it was just amazing.
Well, as a consumer of the food, I can say that it was fantastic, and it was really eye-opening for me. And you took everyone through all the stories behind every course, which I hope we sort of hear a little bit more about today as well. But just coming back to the fact that you quit a very, I'm sure, secure, well-paid job as someone in marketing and advertising to get into this. I'm the last one who can talk about doing exactly the same thing, but what triggered your madness?
I really don't know. It's a question I ask myself almost every other day. But it makes me happy. I think I'd reached a point where I wanted to do something that truly made me happy. Also, it's a little bit of home, so it's a lot of nostalgia for me as well. It's my childhood, and this is. I thought, okay, let's do this, and it literally started as a pop-up. I didn't think I would do anything with it. I thought it was just, we'll do like a couple of pop-ups. We'll just introduce people. My weekends will be kind of a lot of fun, and then is what I thought. But that was the thought. And then reality hit, and it turned, slowly into a business. And we opened our own commercial space, and I was like, why am I even doing this? What am I even doing? But at the end of the day, it still brings me joy.
You made it sound very easy to say, I just decided to do a couple of pop-ups. How did you actually go about the process of learning how to cook and how to cook this food?
Okay. So I have actually lived away from home since I was 13. I went to
Home
is Indore, Madhya Pradesh, the heart of Madhya Pradesh. And I went to boarding school when I was 13. And most borders, which was in Pune, and most borders or anybody who's ever lived away from home will always tell you that log to theek hai, khane ki bahut yaad aati hai. Because you really miss it. And every time I did go back, I would, have a list. This aunt is supposed to make this dadi is supposed to make this, and it's a small city. So all your extended family, your friends, grandparents, they're all your grandparents, firstly. All homes are accessible. It's just how you kind of grow up, right? And I would first day sit and start calling. Acha, fir parso I will come for this. Then narso. So it was like a whole thing. And over the years, when I kept going back, I realized some of those things on that list either had suddenly disappeared because the dadi or an old cook or somebody had moved on or had passed away, or it was just too much of a job for somebody to make. We're going to elaborate. I don't know. And I just felt like, my God, if I come back 20 years from now, will I ever get to eat this? Even a version of it, forget the exact way I remember it in my mind, but even a version of it. So I actually started taking notes for myself. And I thought, okay, once a week, maybe I can make something for myself, right? And then also, my parents kind of realized that I enjoyed this. And my Nana and Dada both had a very, very detailed recipe book. Wow. Because Okay, so they were the first non-vegetarians in our family.
I was going to ask you,
Yes.
because you come from a Brahmin family.
I do.
And
I do.
really like sort of Brahmins eating non-vegetarian, but you mentioned that, you didn't grow up eating non-vegetarian.
I did. And because it wasn't, I think, a part of our family's culinary history, it had to be written down and documented because these men would cook outside the house or a separate kitchen. They still weren't, even though they were the men of the house and, typically. But my grandmothers and on both sides were very, very
Strict about
not cooking inside. So they had to kind of go out and cook and their separate cooks would come. And I remember this. And, but I'm also very, very thankful that they made notes. My grandmothers made notes because they realized the entire family, all the children suddenly are eating and their guests are eating. And so there were notes and there was a very, very detailed books that we still have. And I think that really also helped me because, when somebody actually writes recipes and it's not a book, there are tiny star notes. And that would give you a little perspective on where they ate it first. Or who they ate it with first, which chilies were used, or which part of Madhya Pradesh, so that region they were in. And that kind of also makes it even more interesting because what is food if it's not history?
Absolutely.
Right? I mean, it's so much easier to relate to what you're eating when you know where it's from, who it was made for, any of that. And so that's how I actually started cooking. It really was purely greed. And nothing else.
So is it fair to say that your grandmothers were maintaining the vegetarian recipe book in a way and your grandfathers were? That's so fascinating. And I think it's amazing that they were cooking because everyone has these stories about how I learned from my grandmother. But I think it's Pam that you learned from your
grandfathers.
Yeah.
So I started, I would always cook something when I visited home. But it was my own kitchen while I was away in Pune after school, where I would make chicken curry. Every weekend I decided for myself I will make chicken curry. And if my roommates want in on it, great. But if they don't, it's fine. And that's how it started, really. And then I've also never gone back home. I've always still lived away. So obviously as you grow older, your palate also becomes more and more refined. So I think every time that I wanted to kind of take it up a notch. It's also something I used to de-stress with. I still do. When I'm in my kitchen, it's like my zone, I'm very happy kind of doing whatever I'm doing. And so weekends, because I would be cooking, so we had to by force invite friends because somebody has to eat what has been cooked. And so it just so happened that some friends and Neville's like, why don't you actually just do a pop-up? Because, everything that you make is really delicious. It's something we feel that works for us. But it's something we've never eaten before. So why don't you do a pop-up? And, just then, it's around that time that home chefs had just kind of started.
This is what, 2015?
Yeah, 2015. And it had just as a concept started. And there was this company that NCR Leswala had called Small Fry Company. And it was, my first pop-up was in a furniture store in a lane in car where people had to sit down and eat.
Wow.
It was, yeah.
Is that how you envisioned it?
No, I didn't know better, right? I had no idea what I was doing. I just knew my
Where was
food.
the kitchen in the furniture store?
It wasn't there. There was no kitchen. So most of the stuff was coming from my house, which is in Bandra. It was coming hot in baked cheese. And then I was serving it here in this furniture store in car. And there was no concept of logistics. I didn't even think about it. There was no bas karna hai, theek hai, khana khilana hai. It was as simple. And that pop-up, we had people we didn't know. And those people actually wrote to me. I got emails after that. And I was like, I have to do this. Because if this is what just this one tiny pop-up does, and these people are suddenly talking about a cuisine that otherwise nobody ever talks about the royal food of Malwa. Everybody's like, royal bola to Rajasthan.
Or Lucknow.
Or Rampur, or Hyderabad. But nobody talks about this, which is right in the heart of our country, which has Can you imagine it's the only region that has all communities, like almost all Kshatriya communities or ruling classes, because it was such an important part of our country. So if you had to conquer the Deccan, you had to pass through. So right from the Delhi Sultanate, who were they were in Mando, to the Mughal Empire, who went all the way to Burhanpur, to the second and third sons of Jodhpur and Jaipur, and that all of Rajputana were given smaller holdings here. To when the Marathas went to up north, they had to kind of keep securing every territory as they moved. So this is such an important, like, culinary, historic, culinary, all of that region that nobody talks about. And so, yeah, I mean, that's how, with like a pop-up, furniture store, we started.
I love that story. And it sounds like the OG supper club, which is now becoming a big thing. But, that's amazing that in spite of all that logistic madness, you didn't get put off, and that but of course, if you got those reactions and responses, like, it would have been an injustice to not continue doing this, and that's amazing.
And it made me no money. Might I please tell you?
Welcome to my
every pop-up I did, I was just doing it, and I was like, what are we doing this for? Because this entire weekend, my house gets taken over by mad people. You're there, the staff is there, this is happening. Like, I can't get like one single meal. Why are we doing this? And I'm like, I don't know, it just makes me happy. And like,
makes sense.
That's it, it makes no sense.
So this was back in 2015, and you started with these pop-up. How has it evolved with, of course, COVID thrown in for good measure?
COVID actually did us good.
I'm
surprisingly,
sure.
But it did. So the first 3 years almost of our journey was still pop-ups. It was when I had the time, when I wasn't traveling for work, is when I said, okay, I'll do the pop-up.
So you were still working professionally through this time?
Yeah, I was working. There wasn't, it wasn't like this was my only thing. But I think the first big break kind of happened at the Flea Bazaar Cafe in Doparel, the Impresario outlet, is where we got a small space, which was a restaurant and restaurant model. And that was our first break into actually being in a commercial space and actually understanding, or even, honestly, even just serving food that goes out immediately. That happened, and then COVID happened. Just when I thought, chalo, okay, I've got something, and then COVID happened, and we shut, and Flea Bazaar shut, and the world shut. And then we were at home, and I was losing my mind, because now I was like, I was going to do this full time. I don't know what to call it, but I'm very confused in a sense. Sometimes I feel that because I'm not a trained chef, do I even deserve to be in this space? And do I deserve to do this and, or continue doing what I'm doing? And so it's a very internal battle. And so started this, I had already moved to a space. It was a restaurant space. Now it's a step back. I'll have to become a home chef again. And do I want to do, then I was like, just do it. And then I called Riaz one day, and I'm like, I tell you, he said, just do it. Just start. If the whole world is at home, just do it. And then we'll see. I was like, you know what, fine, chalo. Let's do a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday menu and see what happens. And it really picked up. And to a point that I had to start saying no. When things started opening up, I was saying no to work. I was saying no to caterings, because from a home kitchen, it wasn't possible,
Sure.
And then we're like, maybe we've reached a point where we should get a kitchen, like a commercial space where we can cook, where there are fridges, where things, because in COVID, I'm not kidding. So we lived in this really nice building, and we had friends, and everybody around our age lived, and it was like a 7-storied. At one point, for one catering, I have used everyone's fridge. I have had everyone's keys. From 7th floor, I have opened, they are sleeping at 3 in the morning, put food in their fridge, got to the 6th floor, done the same thing, the 5th. I have actually done this, and then opened it early in the morning and removed all the food. And I was like, nobody's going to let me keep doing this when the world opens. I need a space. And so we, took a leap of faith and said, okay, Swiggy, Zomato, we kareenge, sab kar lenge. It's been a good journey.
I love the determination, and that's such a fabulous story. That really is the willpower it takes, honestly, when you go through these ups and downs in this business, because you invariably do. It's not something that's an easy ride for sure. So, Anu, I mean, these are really fantastic stories, but I want to talk now about the food. One thing I did notice, I mean, it was all supremely delicious, but I did feel that it's not something I would necessarily be able to eat every day, right? So tell us a little more, how does that work for you then when people are sort of maybe trying to eat lighter or, just can't eat that every day?
I think just like any other North Indian Mughlai restaurant works.
Fair point.
This is a question I get asked, but I'm like, you know what? This works because it's been a part. I mean, your Delhi Darbars and Persian Darbars and Jafar Bhais of the world are working, and I feel that at least we are using very, very pure ingredients, right? Even our ghee comes from Madhya Pradesh. So even though it does feel heavy, you never feel, I pride myself upon, you never feel sick because it's cooked like it would be cooked in someone's house.
But you're right. I ate a lot and it was rich, but I didn't feel sick. Tell us a little bit about you had some fascinating stories about the dishes. And I remember the one which really caught me off guard, and I was not expecting that, was the dal which you served, which was almost like a paste in a way, and you said that there was no water used to make this, and there was just a lot of ghee, and it was a very strange texture initially for me to have, but I just couldn't stop eating it, and I was just like, it was like this addictive thing that you just took one more bite, and before you knew it, you'd eaten the whole thing. Tell us the origins of this cuisine.
Dal beab is what you had.
Beab meaning without water.
Yes, beab means without water. We have to understand that the royalty were the first gourmands. They were the first people who truly enjoyed food. And they had all the money, all the power, all the resources at their disposal. And so they really took a lot of interest in the food that was getting cooked. Also, another thing when you say heavy food is also this food was made for royalty. It was made for the king, it was made for the princess, it was made for the Maharanis, and So the Hakims or the court physicians got involved in actually designing these meals. And every recipe would actually be paired with something that would enhance the healing properties of something that is a part of it. So there would be dry foods, there would be beaten gold, beaten silver, part of an egg that is cooked another way and another that is cooked another way. To coax young princess to eat protein, mutton would be transformed into a halwa, and machli would be made into a gulab jamun, because like children today who want to eat popsicles and chocolate, they would want to eat laddu, peda and halwa. Wow. And so the cooks had to be very, very innovative. Also, once the British came, they weren't really fighting. There was no one-upmanship. So how do you compete? Through food. Wow. So you went to one royal house and you went for like a state dinner and you ate something, and there are stories, and then the guy comes back saying, "Ab aap hamare yahan padhare." Aur ab jab aap padharenge, then the chefs were told ki I ate all of this. We have to outdo this this guy. And that's how it worked. And it was a very, very, very serious.
So it was a very competitive.
It was a very,
space,
and so they just kept bringing out the best of the best of the best. They traveled the world. They came back with things that they eaten there. They came back with chefs. There is stories of French chefs at the Lal Bagh Palace, or the Scindias had like an entirely most kitchens actually, most royal palaces had different kitchens. One was an Indian kitchen, one was a Western kitchen, and then one was a pure vegetarian kitchen, because the women, the widows or the women had given up on eating meat. But they also craved meat. So there's a whole lot of recipes, vegetarian recipes that are made to kind of resemble meat so that they don't miss. It's very interesting. So when you actually do eat, you will never eat the same thing twice. You also had forests. It was a region of plenty. तो एक तो इनके पास इतना पैसा है, इनके पास इतना exposure है, but also the region itself is so rich, right? You have the forest, so you have game, you have wild food, you have fruits, you have mahua, you have amla, you have things that you can literally forage. And when hunting parties went into the forest, there was a completely different kind of food. So शिकार का एक अलग recipe था. And the shikar cooks were separate because whatever was hunted had to be cooked nose to tail. It's not a new concept. Everything had to be utilized, either dried, either pickled, either cooked there and then in the absence of maybe even water because you're deep in the forest. So how do you cook this? And so it's a very, very interesting thing, and then marriages happened. Marriages as far as Nepal happened, and then in Gwalior, there's a huge Nepal influence because the queen was, a Nepalese princess who came with her cooks, and so it's a whole.
So it's a millage of like all
of
these influences from all over. That's fascinating.
And produce of Madhya Pradesh.
I have to say, like listening to you talk about this aspect of food really evolving from your environment. I think what's really fascinating is that there's so much learned about our regional foods by now understanding the lay of the land. It's not just about the act of eating anymore and trying something new. You're actually understanding a lot more about our country, and at least I am. And so tell us a little bit more about those specific influences from around the states around MP.
So MP is actually right. So there's Maharashtra, there is Gujarat, there is now Jharkhand, which was actually a part of our state earlier. Chhattisgarh was, but also Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, that belt. Rajasthan, like a big influence. Rajput influence. It's a huge influence, especially in the royal classes. It is, so you will have chicken made like a curry. Murge ki curry. Curry is something which is...
Oh, curry as in like the Gujarati curry?
The curry. But because it's influenced by Rajputana, it's a desert land, right? There isn't anything really. Now things are, it's very prosperous. But back in the day, there wasn't. So you kind of stored stuff, you dried stuff, and you use chickpea. If you have something, any protein available, so you have murgi or you have mutton or whatever, how do you cook it? How do you give it like body, the gravy body? One of the ways to do it was with besan. So they said, "Ek second, hum kadhi pakoda khayenge. Why can't we have murge ki curry?" I mean, that's, I think yahi socha hoga. I mean, they're sitting, this is exactly what they would have thought. This is what we're eating, this is available. Why can't I do this? This murgi is right here. I have besan, let's do this. And so they did it. And it's one of the finest dishes. Like, every time I came back from boarding school, this had to be made. Like, this is one of my first meals at home. And it's smoked and it's beautiful and, so you have, and then you have lal mas, you have jangli mas, you have khad, things that are made deep inside the ground, which is again something that came to us from the desert dwellers, right? Because you can't cook reti hai, it's just going to, sand is just going to fly around. One of the easy way to cook is actually to put something in the ground. How do you keep fire going otherwise if it's not, deep within?
Yeah.
And so we did a version of it with the spices that we had available, right? When the Marathas moved, so now Marathas are moving, they have gone to Devas, they've gone to Indore, they've gone to Gwalior. At one point, the Mughal emperor was actually paying tribute to the Marathas in Gwalior. We'd gone and, captured. And the Maratha Empire was called Atak to Katak, which is the absolute north and the absolute south of our country. And the country means beyond Pakistan, because Hindustan was one large entity. And that's how large the Maratha rule was. And after the Battle of Panipat, we lost, and a lot of people never came back. Because how do you come back? You've lost a battle, so just purely out of shame. And funnily so, in the mountains, you will find very Maratha surnames randomly. These are people who never came back and started new families, just purely out of shame. But the families that stayed, so you have your Baroda, which is in Gujarat. Very powerful. It's a 21-gun salute state. Gwalior, 21. Again, you have Indore, which is the Holkar state, which is a 19-gun salute state. I think you have Devas, which is an 11. You have Dhar. These are all Maratha states. Now, when the army moved, you had your pandits, your priests, your regular people.
Yeah.
You had everybody that moved, right? Like an entire country moved with the troops. And then when you kept settling, they kept settling. And then today, Madhya Pradesh has such a large number of Maharashtrians. There's a huge community. And you will find Amti that you find in Maharashtra. But here we will use Amsul. But in the interior, you will use Imli. Kolhapur will have Kara mutton, the black mutton. A similar recipe you will find in Gwalior, which is all the way near Delhi. But you'll find it. You will find, so you'll find Nararachi chutney, which is coconut chutney that you have with your vada pav, right? It's famous because you have it with your vada pav. But you will have something like that in Gwalior again called Abar Dobar. You will have vara and you will have, it's really quite something, and you'll find different versions of it. But it's the same thing. And so that's how you'll find like a lot of Maratha recipes, and you'll find your coconut and your poha and your sabudana, and you'll find all of that. And this is something you'll find on the streets. You don't even have to go to a royal household. But can you imagine what royalty would have done? Because they were the real, historically, they're the custodians of food, culture, even religion, right? They're the first protectors of the faith, whatever faith they follow. And so with them, they really kind of took it all. And so on festivals, they really go all out. And then we cannot forget that the Delhi Sultanate was there, after which the Mughals were there, after which the Bhopal royalty is there. And with them came a very different kind of cuisine, rich, laden with kesar and with dry fruits. And so you find all of that. And contrary to what people say and believe, back in the day, people were very conscious about, especially royalty, what my praja eats. Right? So even though there would be boar that would be really kind of made in the palace, it wasn't something that was very freely, it never became like a regularly eaten meat available to everybody, because there were Muslims that were a part of their praja. And likewise, even the Muslim rulers were very, very careful to, though even if they did eat beef, it never really kind of became very in your face or, locally easily available. And I think that really goes to show how even small decisions that they made about what they were doing with their life was very, very thought through. And food is such an important way, a political way of using it in that sense to benefit.
You're absolutely right. Even today it's become a sort of political subject, right?
Yeah.
And what you can and can't eat.
What royalty ate is very different from what the locals eat, right? Locally, there is sabudana khichdi, very popular street food. You have,
in fact, that's the thing, that there are these places that are told to stop at on the way from Indore to Maheshwar. I remember that. I can't remember the name of the place, but it's like you have to go there and eat the sabudana khichdi. And I'm like, we're in the middle of MP. Isn't this like Maharashtrian food?
Yes.
Yeah.
And then you'll have poha, and every house will have their pohe wala, because it is like
And it's very different because I think it was actually the poha, not the sabudana, and it's with save on top, which you don't eat it with over here. So I guess that's the...
We can eat everything
back to, yeah.
So it's the basin that's coming back to something very, very Maharashtrian, right? It is exactly. So that kind of just sums up your entire region, and you have it with jalebi.
Yeah, you're right.
Out of all things, which is a Mughal influence. And that's your, so it's a plate of like Maharashtrian, Rajput, Mughal. Eat it early in the morning after you've walked. And I don't know how anybody is losing weight, but this is what you have at 7 in the morning. And then you have sabudana, which is steamed, which is very different from the sabudana you get here, which is steamed. We're all chatoras. MP is full of chatoras, mean people who
snack all day.
Chatpat things, right? I mean, you give us something which is like just got like a one-dimensional flavor, we'll be like, nahi. उसके ऊपर जीरावन डालो, उसके ऊपर चाट मसाला डालो, नींबू डालो, अचार लाओ, सेव लाओ. No, we can never just have dal chawal. Any MPite anywhere in the world cannot just have dal chawal. There will have to be 20 other things with it. So we're all chatoras, and that reflects in the street food. Also, most communities in Madhya Pradesh were vegetarian, especially your Gwalior, your Indore, your Dhar, your this region. Bhopal has actually got a history, and it still has a lot of non-vegetarian street food, which is missing in the rest of MP. And because your trader class were the Marwadis, the Jains, the Baniyas, the Gujaratis, and Sarafa, which is the famous markets typically in the old part of the city where jewelry shops shut and then the night market starts. But it's a pure vegetarian street food culture. You'll have your kachoris, which came from Rajasthan because they were easy. What is a kachori? It's something very easy to carry. It's dough, it's stuffed with protein. You'll have your moong dal, or now we have aloo, but typically it was dried moong dal that was stuffed. So when a trader community, anybody, was going on the long voyage from Marwar, they could carry it in their bags and eat it even a day later or 2 days later. And it wouldn't spill. It was easy to carry. Now that's a part of our street food. Then because again vegetarian, we have a lot of upvas that you get readily available everywhere. Because people are fasting 3 weeks, 3 times a week. आज मेरा Tuesday का व्रत है, आज मेरा इसका something or the other is there.
This is
easily accessible.
This is exactly why I didn't associate so much non-vegetarian food with, and when you were like laying it on, it was a very sort of eye-opening experience. And I have to ask you something just to go back. You talked about 21 gun salute and 19 and 11. It sounds a little competitive, but what's the historical significance of this?
So when the British came and annexed our country, gun salutes were given. Depending on how important the royal state was, 21 being the highest, that meant that you are seriously very, very, very important. Which was, I think, in the Maratha states was Baroda and Gwalior. I think there were 7 21 gun salute state, and then it just kind of trickled down. And according to the gun salute, you also kept an army, which would then kind of aid the British as and when they required. So I think that all...
coming back to now sort of the business of what you're doing, and you talked a little bit about this almost imposter syndrome you feel as a home chef. And, I've had Chef Anuradha Joshi on one of my previous episodes where he's also he started with these home supper clubs and then, now also cooked at Max Street Kitchen. And he's been I guess the difference is when you cook for friends and when you start charging people for it, right? And that's when you, it shifts a little bit. And there is a little bit of, I guess, prejudice in a way, I mean, for want of a better word, about our home chefs really, capable. Like, I think that people are now, don't have a choice but to embrace this. And yes, there is a certain responsibility that comes when you're charging people. But what's your perspective today?
I think things have changed also. Like you said, over the years, things have changed. In my journey, when I started out, was 2015. And like I said, it was just starting out. I feel like I've learned on the job, as most home chefs do. And I've learned applying the most basic knowledge that has been passed on in families by our grandmothers of how you preserve stuff, how you store stuff, how you keep it clean. It's very practical knowledge. It's not something learned by going to college. It's not very technical. It's very, very practical. I think these are the things where a home chef versus a trained chef would kind of differ.
What would your advice be to someone who does have, haath mein kuch hai and wants to do this and is being told by friends and family that you've got to start this? I mean, that's how a lot of it does start, right? And so what would your advice be?
Start. Don't, if you're inclined towards it and you truly enjoy it, start. Because if it's good, food is something that if it's going to make you happy when you're cooking it, the person who's going to eat it is going to get happy. I really feel that प्यार से बनाओ, this घर में प्यार से खाना बनता है, it's a very real thing. If it's made with love, the person eating it will feel the love and enjoy that food. So start with whatever resources that you have. There is actually, there's so much that is accessible now. There are easier delivery systems. Earlier that wasn't the case. Now even that is available. You have your Dunzos and VFA, so you use that. You don't feel that you're not technical enough. The person ordering from you knows you're a home chef. Don't beat yourself up about things that you will learn but are not necessarily a skill that you have. Don't beat yourself about, oh, I don't have this and I will not be able to do this and how will I do it? Do it. You'll make a mistake, you will learn.
Yeah, I mean, I can say that that's absolutely true even for restaurants. It's not like we had it like 100%
exactly
right off the bat, and a lot of it evolves as you make mistakes. So you will make mistakes no matter how sort of experienced or inexperienced you are, but if you don't do it, you won't...
No, you won't. So just do it. You want to start deliveries. But remember that you have to keep working on building your skill. You cannot say that I only want to do this food and this is it. But there's so many ways of doing this food itself. And improving it. Exactly these flavors, exactly what you're doing can be done in so many ways.
Thank you for being so candid and, talking about the journey. And I'm sure it's been very inspirational for people who, are thinking about this and just need that little push. And please keep cooking and doing what you're doing. And don't ever stop. And
thank you.
But anyway, we're going to end on a slightly more fun game.
Okay. Charoli is a nut.
Okay, this is unfair. I could have Googled it.
2. Malwa is in Madhya Pradesh and not on the Malwan coast of Maharashtra. 3. Vegetable biryani.
What about it? Is it such a thing? Is there a thing as vegetable?
I don't know.
Oh.
Fact or fiction?
Okay. I'm going to go with Charoli's a nut because you are a nut and that's the only thing that you could have come up with. I know Malwa is an MP because if there's one thing I've been listening to, hopefully, otherwise you have every right to shoot me at the end of this.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go with the veg biryani sort of, is that a...
It's a statement in itself because there's no such thing as a vegetarian biryani.
Okay, explain.
It's a pulao.
So why can't you say vegetarian biryani?
Because nahi hoti hai na, vegetarian pulao hota hai. Vegetarian biryani is not a thing.
No, you have just smashed so many...
It's not a thing.
You have just thrown shade on so many menus across the country.
I know. But it's not a thing. It is a pulao.
Is this because of technique?
There are multiple things. Biryani by design is meat and rice. Okay. Then is the technique of layering it, where the fat of the meat has to mix with the fat of the rice. So aap jab biryani lete hain, every dana has to be coated with a little fat. Right? And it has to have multiple colors. Because if it doesn't have multiple colors, it's a pulao. Because it's not been cooked on dum. And that ain't ever going to happen with a vegetarian biryani.
Bleed colors.
Exactly. It isn't going to happen. So there is no such thing.
Okay.
In my mind, at least. I mean, this is a conversation that can go on with biryani purists.
Well, if anyone has any issue on it, she said it, not me. So
I did.